Welcome back, listeners. I'm Robin Black, and this is It's All About Healing podcast. Today, we have a special guest with us, Valerie. She is the co-executive director of Families for Depression and Depression Awareness. And I'd like to introduce her today and thank you again so much for coming on today. Valerie, so tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, Robin, it's such a pleasure to be with you today as well and to be talking to your listeners. As you said, I'm Valerie Cordero. I'm co-executive director of Families for Depression Awareness. We are a national nonprofit organization that helps families recognize and cope with depression and bipolar disorder to get people well and prevent suicides. My journey to nonprofit work has been a bit circuitous. I started out pursuing higher education in music. I got my master's and Ph.D. in ethnomusicologist, which is the study of music and culture. And then after completing that, I pivoted to nonprofit work. And so I've been with Families for Depression Awareness since 2010 and had pretty much every job there is to have in the organization, including now being co-executive director. So that's just a little bit about me.
Wow, I like that. So tell us a little bit about like merging the music and the culture. What is that about? What does that entail?
So I really enjoyed studying ethnomusicology. Music has always been in my heart. I've been a singer, been a performer, and studied at Spelman. I got my undergrad degree at Spelman College. I was in the Glee Club. And then I went to UCLA where as I said, did my master's and PhD. My focus was on the religious music of the African diaspora. So I started looking first at African American music, religious music, and then I studied, as part of my PhD process, the music of the Protestant Revolution in Cuba, in Western Cuba, mostly in Havana. And I spent some years researching there and living there. And so that was fantastic. And the good thing about the switch to nonprofit work is that a lot of what I was doing a lot of those skills were transferable. So I was already learning how to talk to people and get them to trust me in order to do interviews and doing grant writing and really doing work that I believed in. So that translated pretty well to mission-focused work. Okay. I also have a family history of depression and bipolar disorder. I also have suicide in my family history. So the cause is very near and dear to my heart. And so doing work where I'm connecting with people, helping people was a pretty easy switch for me.
Okay, I like that. And tell us a little bit about the suicide prevention. Like, what exactly does your company do for suicide prevention?
So we have a philosophy that when a person is living with a mood disorder, so depression in all its different forms, bipolar disorder in all its different forms, that it's not just the person living with a condition who's affected, it's the loved ones around them. It's mom, dad, grandparents, siblings, spouses, partners. Yet those are the same people who oftentimes don't know what they're supposed to be doing. They're usually the first ones to see that something is going on with their loved ones, but they don't always know how do we get a proper diagnosis for the loved one? How do we navigate care? And what should we be on the lookout for in terms of suicide risk factors? And so as an organization, we focus on the family caregiver, which makes us a bit of a niche player in this space. But we really believe that when you can prepare, equip, educate, and support the loved ones around the person with the diagnosis, then the person with the diagnosis has a better chance of positive health outcomes. So we teach the caregivers, again, what to look for, what are the signs if the person hasn't been diagnosed yet, how do you work within the healthcare and mental health care system, which is not an easy thing to do. How to recognize if your loved one is struggling and needs additional support. What to do if you want to work outside of the mental health care system, if you're looking for what are called alternative treatment options. And then just how to, we also do a lot of basics around communication and setting boundaries and what to do if the family is not in agreement on how to move forward in supporting that loved one. So that's a lot of what we do. And we do that through workshops and webinars, publications. We do live stream educational events So we're really taking more of a public health approach in trying to reach as many people as possible with this education and making an impact in that way.
Wow. And you said you do webinars as well?
Yes.
Wow. Okay. We'll definitely get back. I want to touch base on that again
Yes,
as
sure.
well. And then I noticed that you also stated about the mistrust and the resentment that breeds between the family members. Tell us a little bit about your expertise in that.
Well, so we see this a lot, unfortunately, with families, and a lot of times nobody ever comes to us because things are going well. I always say that they're not like, "Hi, calling to let you know that we're doing great." So thanks.
Yeah.
They usually are coming to us because there's some issue going on. So sometimes it's my loved one doesn't want to accept help. So we work with caregivers a lot on the stages of change and what you can expect if somebody is not ready to accept help, what you can be doing in the meantime, because you cannot force anybody to do anything really. They have to make it for good, long-lasting change. That change has to come from within the person, and so we talk a lot about that. But when sometimes caregivers, when they mean well, but they will overstep certain lines and try to take over care, more of a top-down approach. There used to be a time where you could just get your loved ones committed to a mental health facility without their consent. And so there are more and better rules around that now. But those kinds of things can break trust between loved ones. Sometimes, again, if let's say mom and dad are not on the same page about how to support the teenager in this scenario, the teenager who's dealing with depression, and one parent is doing certain things that the other parent doesn't agree with, that can breed long-term mistrust and resentment between family members. So we talk a lot about action planning, including that loved one. If it's from a teenager to an adult, you always want that person to be very much involved in their own care, because if you want it to be successful, they have to make a lot of those decisions themselves. But then those loved ones around, those loved ones around the person living with depression or bipolar disorder, they really need to be on the same page. They don't have to agree. You can move forward without being in total agreement in terms of your opinions. But if it's, you know what, we don't agree on where our loved one, like where they should live, and they're not on the same page with us, but let's just agree the first step is getting that right diagnosis, because we think just this doctor didn't know what they were talking about. So let's focus on that. And when family members can kind of take the emotion out of it and really work on supporting that loved one on the path toward wellness that they have defined for themselves, then you can see that positive action. Then it's, well, so-and-so, they really, their top concern is they are dealing with these symptoms and they just can't take it anymore. So let's work on what would it take to get them to want to re-engage more in their life. That's what they want to do. So let's support them around that goal and really trying to narrow that focus and knocking down those things, one by one, as opposed to, remember that time when grandma told me she liked me better than you? And, that's not as productive when helping a loved one on their path to wellness. That's something that can be worked on in family therapy and individual therapy. But when somebody is really struggling and having, if they're at the point where they're not engaging in their life, or they're, God forbid, suicidal, you need to focus on the immediate action steps in front of you and knock those out. And then in separate therapies and other healing exercises, work on those other elements that might be needed.
And what are some of for other families out here, what are some of the early signs that they can tell that their loved one is suffering from depression?
That's a great question, Robin. So the thing that you should be looking for most is a change in your loved one. So if your loved one was never really social and now they're not social, that might not be a big change for them. But if your loved one was someone who really enjoyed being with their friends and going out to do a certain activity, if they called often and were in touch, if they were someone who really had a passion for a particular hobby and those things have changed, that's definitely a sign that something is going wrong. With depression, the symptoms can be sadness, irritability, isolation, anger and generally feeling hopeless, not seeing a future for themselves. That could be a sign of depression. With bipolar disorder, if they are seeming more impulsive, if they have these high highs where it seems like they're going, and their energy is limitless. And maybe when they talk, it sounds like it's just racing thoughts. It's not making a whole lot of sense. If they start spending extravagantly when they have the means, or if they don't have the means, or showing sexual promiscuity in a way that is out of line with how they usually are, and recklessness, those kinds of things could be indications of bipolar disorder. And in those cases, it's really good you can do a screening online. You can take those to a primary care physician if the person doesn't already have a mental health clinician, and get referred to a mental health provider to get a proper evaluation, a good diagnosis, which looks like, eliminating any other health concerns, and really taking a full family history, taking into account a lot of different factors for that person's health before coming to and their symptoms before coming to a diagnosis.
And then as far as like on the depression side of things, I know I myself have suffered from depression, and a lot of times we love to pretend that we're not, right? So it's very hard to kind of break through that barrier. But what would you suggest for family members, like when you're trying to hide something, but the family members are noticing it? And so to not set the other person off, like what's the best way for them to kind of bring it up and let them know, hey, I'm noticing this about you, without making that person angry?
Yeah, so part of that is choosing the right time. That always helps. So you want to choose a time where you can have the person's full attention. There aren't a bunch of distractions around, and they are in a calm state of mind, and so are you. You want to approach a person with your observations in the most non-judgmental way as possible. So instead of saying something like, you've been a jerk lately, which sounds pretty confrontational and judgmental. It's, I noticed that you haven't been going out to go bowling like you usually love, or your friend has been I've noticed your friend's been trying to call you and you keep rejecting the call, and bringing that up again, in a non-judgmental way, and say, I'd like to know, is there something that you want to talk about? How have you been feeling? Do you feel like you might be depressed? It doesn't hurt to ask those direct questions. And then you follow that conversation with good active listening. So making eye contact with the person, reflecting back the things that they're saying to you, and showing that you hear and understand what they're saying. And you want to encourage them to take that next step for an evaluation if you're concerned. So it sounds like, because of this, and this, you may be dealing with depression. But since I'm not a doctor and neither are you, why don't we call your primary care physician and see if we can get you an appointment, or we can try to get an appointment with a mental health clinician. The reason we sometimes recommend a primary care physician first is because it might be easier to get an appointment with them, and your loved one may already have a relationship, or should already have a relationship with that primary care provider, and they can at least get the ball rolling and, like I said, eliminate maybe some other health conditions that could be going on, and give you a referral to a mental health provider who can do a more thorough analysis. Right. So again, those keys are finding the right time, approaching with observations in a non-judgmental, non-confrontational way, listening to what they say, and then encouraging follow-up with a professional.
And then as far as an approach for the people who are in families where their families just aren't really aware of the signs, but instead of realizing that, hey, something might be wrong with my loved one, they present them with anger. Like, what's wrong with you? I need you to just stop acting like that. And they kind of add on, they kind of make it worse. So the person who's suffering from depression or suffering from any type of disorder or illness, what's the best thing for them to do? Like, what's the awareness there in regard for where they can go?
Yep. So every family is different, and families can have different levels of function and dysfunction.
Yeah.
And you may have a few family members who are educated about the signs of a mood disorder, and some who are not. Some who are willing to approach the person with kindness and compassion and love, and others who are not, who take it as a reflection of themselves, or they reflect the stigma around mental health. So you're probably, most families are going to have a mixture of all of these kinds of people. So if you are the one who is more aware and can approach the person with compassion, but the others around, you want to find some other allies there so that if it's not mom and dad, if it's cousin, if it's spouse, if it's best friend, this is where having a broad community of support is really helpful. So if that person had a coach that they're really close to, and who would help with approaching and compassion, that's a good ally to have in these conversations. This is not saying to do an intervention, but it's you want to look for who are those people. If it's not family, who are those people who the person of concern is close to, who you can get on the same page with, and you can echo the same messages, maybe in separate conversations, to the person, and encourage them and let them know that you'll be with them regardless. And if they're not ready to go get treatment, that you will still be a supportive person in these ways. And then try to proceed with those who are, and the people who are giving those negative messages, or who are responding in anger. You can't change those people. What you can do is try to provide that counterbalance to those folks, encourage them to seek their own care and treatment. And if you have the education, just try your best to provide it to the others. So you can go to a website like familyaware.org, like my organization's website, and find that information and share it with other people. You can tell folks, hey, what we're doing is not working. It's not helping. So why don't we find out more about what is affecting, Tina or Bob or whoever. Let's educate ourselves a little bit more, so we can approach with that education and with some love and support. And then you see how far you get with the knowledge that there's no perfect family, and people are not going to approach it in the same way. And most people are dealing with their own stuff and their own concepts of what it means to have a mood disorder or suffer from it. And if it's in a family, it's likely going to be affecting more than one family member, because there is a genetic heredity factor there. So you have to sometimes just deal with the people that you have, and like I said, try to pass that education along, and look for the few like-minded people who can also provide support to the person of concern.
And then I know some people that, some of my clients even that I have that they're suffering from suicidal thoughts, and they say that all I want is just to be left alone. But I know that that's really the time that they really shouldn't be left alone. How would you suggest that we handle a situation like that when they're trying to push us away, but it's clear as day? It's like it's a cry out of just don't leave me because I have these thoughts.
Well, this is a good time to point out that I'm not a mental health clinician, so this is all general advice. So I can't advise people with a mental health background. But what I can say in general education is it's true when people are dealing with those suicidal thoughts, they could be isolating themselves from others and saying they don't need help. You can reiterate that you are there for them. If they are actively suicidal, so if they have a plan and they have the means to carry out that plan, you definitely don't want to leave them alone. You can call 988 for crisis support. You can find your local mobile crisis counseling centers that can send somebody to do an evaluation. So again, if the person is actively suicidal, you don't want to leave them alone because they could follow through with their plan. So you want to get them help. The other option is to see if they will go with you to the local emergency room. Mobile crisis is usually a better place to start, or dialing 988, because they know specifically how to handle mental health crisis situations. But if the person is an imminent risk to themselves or others, you may need to call 911 or go to the local emergency room. This is different than somebody who deals with ongoing suicidal ideation. So suicidal thoughts that never go away, or just they tend to recur over and over again. That's also really challenging, because that person is dealing with a chronic mental health condition, and whatever supports they're getting are not enough to overcome that. And so that's a time to look at what are the supports that person is getting. Are they in regular therapy? If medication's warranted, are they taking medication? Is it being taken the right way? What are their other ties to life? So again, are they connected within their community? Are they doing things that make them feel better about themselves and the world, like volunteering or helping others in some kind of way? Do they have any kind of religious faith? And is that religious faith supportive of the concepts of having good mental health, and that mental health is that a mental health condition is a medical condition? Like, are they getting those messages from that religious institution? So really helping them increase and lean into those supports outside of the medical model to increase their ties to life. But that chronic suicidal thoughts, it's hard to deal with as a loved one, as a caregiver too, because hearing somebody that you love talk regularly about wanting to end their own life or not wanting to be here, it's hard on your own emotions too. So we advise caregivers, get your own therapist and work on making sure you don't become depressed as well, because that's a really hard situation.
Absolutely. And I didn't even know that was a thing, because I know in several situations that it has been where someone was saying, they have these suicidal thoughts, and then it goes away, then it comes back, and then it goes away. So I didn't know that. I'm just glad that you kind of shed light on that, because it's like the family will go into they seem to be okay now, but it's really the fact that it keeps coming. That's a lot of awareness, because you think that it gets better and then they go right back to it. I didn't know that was, what did you call that?
So it's sometimes called passive suicidal ideation, or just having suicidal thoughts, regularly having suicidal thoughts. It can be very challenging for those around the loved one.
Yeah. Okay. I didn't know that was a name for that. So that's it's more like the family and our loved ones. That's something that we all need to kind of get that awareness of, and that education. And I love that about your organization. So now, what led you to starting this organization exactly? Was it your own personal experience, or how did you come about this?
So the organization was actually founded by a woman named Julie Totten in 2001. She had lost her brother to suicide. And at that time, her brother actually died by suicide in 1990. So at that time, that was, can't believe I'm saying it, but 30 years ago, more than 30 years ago at this point. Yeah. So there weren't any supports that she could find for herself as a family member, to tell her, to help her figure out what happened. Did we miss anything? She felt alone and guilty and responsible, and didn't really understand the connection between untreated depression and suicide. So she became educated about these things herself, just learning whatever she could and reading whatever she could. And through that, she actually recognized that her father was depressed and was able to help him get a proper diagnosis. And that was those two parallel experiences from what happened with her brother when she didn't have any knowledge or education or agency around that, to what happened with her father, were two different experiences. So she decided to start this organization, and it was founded in 2001 to help family caregivers. And as our name suggests, it began as an awareness building organization. So telling people, hey, there's this thing called depression that maybe we know about, but people don't talk about it. Secret. Obviously, there have been, the history of psychiatry, and that's gone back many, many years. But just talking about it openly, it not being a secret or something shameful, was something she was really trying to work on and addressing the stigma. So building awareness. When I came to the organization in 2010, we were making a bit of a shift and working more on actionable training, support, and advice for caregivers. So as I said to you before, I have history of mood disorders in my family, and I've seen, what it can do to a family. So it has been a cause that I care about a lot. I'm particularly interested in communities of color where stigma around mental health is still very high. I think it's getting better, but we still have a long way to go. And I'm also part of a suicide prevention in African American faith communities coalition, where we're working on faith communities as a place to really be sending good, correct messaging about mental health and suicide prevention, in a place where a lot of African American families find solace and get their counseling from and their spiritual health, just pushing that message of mental health in those areas as well. So I really am doing the work because I want to make sure that no family, if I can help it, knows the pain of a suicide loss, because it really ripples out and affects people and generations to come. So my focus is on that, and also talking about the role of the family caregiver, and that family members can be involved in positive ways when they have that right information and training, and they're equipped to know how to be a support system to their loved ones. So I'm very passionate about that as a cause, and I think that a lot of people, especially in communities of color, need to hear that over and over again, so we can do better within our own communities.
I like that. And because it's like your outreach is amazing, because it's just like, already I've learned so much, and you're a speaker as well. So what events have you already been a speaker for? Like where are you typically doing these events?
So I participate in a lot of our live educational events as the facilitator with a mental health professional on with us. So we just did a great series on communication. So we did part 2 of a series on communication and teens. And that just happened a few weeks ago. And so that was awesome, taking families, particularly parents, through different scenarios of how to talk to teens who are dealing with a mental health issue. Last year, I did the Black Mental Health Symposium Conference, and I also participated in Site Congress, so a few national conferences that happen. Just trying to, again, talk more about family caregivers, mental health, and getting that message out there. So I have found that to be very important work. And I think once people hear about the concept, it makes sense. They know that nobody is in isolation really dealing with a mood disorder. Everybody who's around them, whether it's their blood family or their found family, is affected too. It's just that not everybody knows there's something that can be done about it, and that when there is something done about it, again, it leads to more positive health outcomes for the person living with a mood disorder. So that's just kind of the drum I'm beating everywhere that I go. I've also done some interviews with magazines and publications, just to, again, talk about mental health, remind people that it's a medical condition, so it's nothing to be ashamed of. You wouldn't tell somebody with cancer, get off the couch, you're just being lazy, like you do with somebody with depression. If you wouldn't do that and tell somebody with, liver failure, oh, it's just a moral disease, a moral failing, pick yourself up and dust yourself off. Like, you wouldn't do that. You would say, well, that's a medical issue, so let's address it that way. And just want that to be the same, that mental health parity in how it's covered by health insurance, and how it is perceived and received by society. So trying to tell people we're not looking at people dealing with a mood disorder as failures, or as people who don't have the spiritual, it used to be, you just not believing in God hard enough, or you're not, you're again, there's something wrong with you. You're morally, like, you're not a good person, or you're lazy, or you're like, just trying to get rid of those ideas and say, no, they're a person who's dealing with an issue that can be addressed. And here are the ways that you can support, starting off by not talking that way and then saying, hey, I'm going to be there for you no matter what, and I'm going to support you, and you let me know how I can be helpful, or these are the ways that I can offer my help. What would be most helpful to you? So I'm just going around beating that drum wherever I go to hopefully make an impact on people and help those who are dealing with depression or bipolar disorder or suicidal thoughts feel less alone. And help the family members feel less alone. You wouldn't believe how many caregivers I've talked to who say, we thought we were the only ones. We didn't want our neighbors to know. We didn't want. I didn't want anybody at work to know why I kept taking off from work. It was because my husband he still isn't doing well, and we want people to feel less alone and to feel like it's okay to talk about these things.
Yeah, and I like that you put focus on the family caregivers as well, because they're typically the ones dealing with the guilt and the shame, and they're trying to hide, and then that essentially will probably lead to their depression as well. So it's hard trying to juggle both sides. It's very difficult, but I like that you spoke about in teens, because I know that can't be. Teens seem like the hardest to reach because they internalize so many things, and that is just like, how do you get your teenagers to talk when they try to hide everything, and they're barely saying words anyway? They're just they don't really use their words, so that's very difficult. But do you are these where you were speaking at these events, are they available for all to see, or where are these at? Where can we find them?
Yeah, so you can find all of our webinars and live stream events on our website, so familyaware.org. We also have a YouTube channel, FFDA1 on YouTube, where again we have all of our recordings and people can find those. We try to make everything as available widely as possible, which is why we are still some of the people mailing things to folks, because we know internet access is not universal. And so we mail publications around the country, but you can definitely see our archive of webinars at familyaware.org/trainings, or just go to familyaware.org and click around. We are on not all social media platforms. We're on Facebook, Twitter, X, LinkedIn at Family Aware, Instagram at Family Aware, and all of those are at Family Aware. You can also find us, like I said, on YouTube at FFDA1, Families for Depression Awareness 1, FFDA1.
That's what I was getting ready to ask. Okay, because I was just like, okay, and that's the number one, right?
Yes, the number one.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, and if out of all information, what would you recommend to all the listeners if there was one or two things that you could recommend? What's the number one?
So number one, educate yourself about mood disorders, what the signs are, what the symptoms are. Definitely learn about the risk factors for suicide and how you can tell if somebody might be thinking of taking their lives and what to do. If you don't know how to get help for your loved one and they are in crisis, you can dial 988. And if you have a teenager, you can put some numbers in their phone. Make sure they have a number to a mobile crisis unit. Make sure they have the number of the counselor at their school in their phone. Make sure they have your phone number saved in their phone, so that if an emergency situation arises for themselves or for one of their peers, they know how to reach out for help. I would also say, just be careful how you talk about mental health, because you never know who's listening, who might be dealing with that issue in themselves or in their family. So try not to use stigmatizing language. Talk about mental health as a medical condition. And like I said, just educate yourself as much as possible. And if somebody that you know is struggling with a mood disorder, help them reach out for help. Offer them your support, your unconditional support and love. You can do that and still have boundaries. It is possible. We have a whole webinar on boundaries if you need help with that. But what they really need is non-judgmental, non-confrontational love and support. And if you can provide that, then that would be wonderful.
All right. Thank you very much. And I'm going to add all of your links in the show notes as well. And I really want to thank you so much. It has been such a pleasure having you, and very, very informative.
Thanks for having me, Robin. And thank you for all your listeners for listening.
No problem. Again, I'm Robin Black, and this is It's All About Healing podcast. Everyone stay blessed.
Again, I'm your host, Robin Black, and this is It's All About Healing podcast. If you're navigating grief, toxic relationships, trauma, financial pressure, or the slow work of rebuilding after setback piled upon setback, this channel is for you. Our community now spans 118 countries, proof that real stories travel and that healing accelerates when we carry one another. Share your story, lend your voice, and let grace turn pain into purpose. Book your podcast in the link below and share your story. Be sure to like and subscribe, and don't forget to hit that notification bell. Wherever you are in the world, good morning, good evening, and good night. Stay blessed.